How's everybody doing today? It's been a while since I posted anything on my channel. I've been super busy here at PSR Performance, which is where I'm shooting this at right now. I'm sitting in my office, and today I'm going to shoot just a basic rundown on how to build a base file with the Holley software. I'm going to be using the Holley Terminator X software. If you're familiar with the Holley softwares, you have the Terminator X, the Sniper, and then also I use V6, some guys still use V4 or V5, which would be for the HP and Dominator computers, and also the regular Terminator, not the Terminator X or X Max. So I'm going to start today with just how to open the file and start, a nice, how to put together a nice base file to get you up and running. I'm not going to do anything with tuning or anything like that as far as like putting something on the dyno. I do have a truck out there that we could go out and fire up, but I already have it tuned. So we have some stuff that basically what I'm trying to accomplish here is that I make a video post of some sort. I'd like to try to do something over the winter here where I'd really like to try to do something once a week. Seems like now the racing's over, I have the time to be able to post, I could shoot video on a Sunday, be able to post it on a Monday type deal. So I'm going to try, life gets busy, so I'm going to do my best here. And it should really work out with the way the holidays are this year as well, that I can, cut a video up on a Sunday and then be able to upload it and, post it on a Friday or on a Monday. So I'm going to try my best. Also, at the same time, let me know anything that you guys want to see. I've had people throughout the years, have commented or messaged me through YouTube or Instagram or Facebook and said, I'd really like to know how to do this with my Holley or with my HP tuners or with my Haltech or whatever. There's not too many systems that I don't touch. There's certain ones I like a hell of a lot more than others, but I've been doing this for 15 years now, and I've basically touched almost every system that I can think of. There's certain ones that are kind of obscure that I haven't, but I all the way back to I was just using Tuner Pro a couple weeks ago. So that's a software I haven't used in over 10 years. So that being said, I'm going to get the segment started with just opening up the software and opening up a file. And what I'm going to do is run down. We're going to use LS-based stuff. It's probably the most common, most popular right now. But the mentality is going to be the same. I'm going to run down the settings and stuff and just be able to say like, hey, like this is the way that things work. So from there, I'm going to roll over my laptop. I'm going to record you so you guys can see me kind of just sitting here. I guess I'll do the picture-in-picture like I've done before. But run through the way that I do this and the way I set up a base file. And this is before I even get on the dyno. So a lot of times this, I don't know, 15 to 30 minute process that you spend setting it up can actually equate to you spending less time on the dyno. So for somebody who's a DIYer, like at my shop, we run classes here. I haven't done one for about a year now, but actually since I broke my back, I haven't done a class. But I kind of want to get back into them this winter. We're probably going to do them. It's a little chilly in here, so I'm going to do my best to try and make that happen. But that being said, a lot of places will rent dyno time to certain people. So if you can get the preliminary stuff already done, you're not farting around with stuff on the dyno, and you can just kind of do your pulls and be out of there, it'll save you money. So that being said, I'm going to roll over my laptop and let's go here. All right, so this is a Terminator X version 2 software, okay? To open up a file, you're going to hit File, Open Global File, and then come down here to Base Cals, and it gives you this warning that, they're just there to set it up and blah, blah, blah. And then you have a couple that they've already made for you. For the people that are out there that have, either already have a Terminator or, they're looking to buy one, I actually buy them and sell them to our customers without the screen, unless the customer really wants it. A lot of times what I'm doing for somebody, if anything, is I'm getting them a screen and I'm getting them the big screen, either like the 6.8 or a 7-inch, one or the other. So on this, we're doing a GM, and then they have a bunch of different ones set up in here. There's actually some decent files in all of these, but we'll do an LS-based. And I'm going to do a 24X drive-by-wire 480. That way it kind of gives us the start of everything. Actually, I should do, they don't have a drive-by wire with turbo. So we'll add in, I'll show you guys how to add in some stuff. So here's the beginning of your file. And they're not terrible files to start out with. Like you could, I actually think these work a whole lot better out of the box than the Wizard does. So the first place that, the one thing I don't like the way Holley has this set up is really the first place you should start should be system. And then you should go to sensors. And then you should go to your fuel, your idle, your spark, your transmission settings, and your drive-by-wire. But it's just kind of the way that they have it set up, whatever it is. I didn't even mean to click that. But the first place you want to go to here is your system, okay? Now, it depends on what you have going on. If you're running a V8, obviously, you're working on an LS, you want to make sure you have the right number of cylinders in here. You want to make sure you have the right displacement. So let's just change this. We're going to put this in as a 427, okay? The other one is you want to make sure that you have the right setting here for load sensing. I like doing VE based. It's a lot easier to think about the numbers, and if something starts looking funky on you, it makes more sense when you're looking at percentage based instead of looking at pounds per hour on fuel flow. So we're going to stay VE based. Fuel type. I was just a post about this this weekend about the people changing fuel types around and then everything gets all screwed up. Look, the part that sucks the most about a Holley is you can't run it on Lambda. Okay, if you're not familiar with what Lambda is, go Google it. I'm not getting into that right now. But if you're not familiar with the fuel type thing here, but you're familiar with what 14.7 is, just keep it as fucking gasoline. Don't even mess around with doing anything else. Just put it as gasoline. Even if you're running E85, keep it as gasoline. If you're running flex fuel, definitely have it as gasoline. It gets even more complicated if you go over into V6 and you're going over to alcohol and all that stuff. If you don't know the numbers and what it's supposed to be, don't even mess with it. This is where somebody who's more of an avid tuner needs to be in there and setting it up correctly. But for this setup, to get you up and running and to be able to get you where you need to be, set it up the way, with the gasoline scale. It's the most common, easy to know. You go online and be like, oh, I'm running 20 pounds of boost, which should my AFR, and somebody tells you, oh, it should be 11.8. Well, if you put it at 11.8 and in the E85 scale, it's going to be lean as shit. So don't be doing that. Obviously, it's multi-port. All this stuff, for the most part, unless you have some swap going on and you got the fuel system pressure is lower for whatever reason, or higher, you can basically leave all this stuff alone. You can't change the wideband type on the Terminator X's, but you can on the HPs and Dominators. Okay, you can run the NTK or the Bosch 4.9 on them. As far as injectors go, they have a ton in the drop-down menu. They add more with like every update, basically. But at the same time, with Lewis's Nova. We actually were able to, we use the APHIS injectors in that, which are a little bit different than what people are used to. And there's a whole nother driver box you got to add in and like all that kind of stuff. And that's actually one of the videos I thought about doing, was doing one where we, like, how to add the injector driver box in and how to set it up. But that being said, this is what, this is the stuff that you can pick and whatever. So let's do something common. We're going to go to a turbo setup here eventually. So I'm just going to put the Bosch 210s in. And it scales everything for you. Okay, this is already all set. Next thing is our ignition parameters. If you're 24X, you can stay 24X. If you're 58X, you can click 58X. I'll just change it around for you. If you've got some custom stuff going on, you can put it over in here. We're going to stay 24X for now. I have no reason to change it. It's not going to really change anything for what we're doing here. Sensor scales and warnings. What this is going to be is like, oh, if you want to put a warning in, let's say you want to put a warning for coolant temperature. You can put the warning, like the displays, and then the max display, you're not going to get more than 260 out of the sensor. Okay. And then the normal, you would put, let's say you're going to run a 210 thermostat, and then the caution, let's say you wanted to make it 220. So now, if you have a dash light set up for it, it'll stay in the green all the time. Okay, like if it's negative, if it reads negative 40, it would actually make sense to have it say that, like, if for whatever reason this thing reads 0, now you got a problem. Okay, like that sensor, unless you're living somewhere crazy, like that sensor should never read less than 0, as far as I'm concerned. So it's nice to set these warnings up. I don't do it on everything, but it's nice to set them up that way. If you do have somebody who has a dash set up, they can go in and be like, oh shit, like, you know, it's in the yellow all of a sudden, and be able to know why. That also crosses over to the oil. You know, you can set it up for RPM as well. This is where you could set your, you know, if you had the mini screen, it would turn red instead of being green, and so on and so forth. And then all these other ones you can set up as well. I don't need to go into each one. But that's what sensor scalings and warnings is. Basic I/O. This is for setting up your fans if you're using the Holley to control the fans, which I suggest that you do. And then you set up your temperatures on when you want the fans to come on. Obviously, this is dependent on how your thermostat works. If you have a 210 thermostat, but you have the fans coming on at 180, you know, there's no point in it because the thermostat's not going to open. Now, if you have a 180 thermostat, but you don't have the fans coming on to 210, well, it's always going to get hotter than that 180 threshold that you have with the thermostat. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind is like, what thermostat do you have? Fuel pumps. If you have a secondary fuel pump, you're going to want to set it how it comes on with this setting here. This is the air conditioning kick one, which is going to basically say like that if there's a coolant temperature issue, or you have something going on, or if you have a maximum TPS, which would give it like what it's going to do with full throttle basically. The IAC kick is how much more percentage you want to put in the IAC when the AC is on. Torque converter clutch. This is the enabled torque converter clutch output. So basically, it's going to be a minimum TPS and a minimum RPM for lockup and a coolant temperature as well. And then there's also unlock settings as well. This is all going to be dependent on what your setup is. You know, mainly if you're running like an all stock setup, you can look at a stock HP tuners file and just figure out where to set those settings for your setup. Staging. This is for if you have a bump. Or something along those lines. If you're using like a trans brake, you can use this setup for staging. I don't use this on our cars, but you can use this. It does work. It just, I have a different way that I do it. Closed loop learning. Out of the box, I leave closed loop on when I first start tuning, and I turn the learn off. When I'm done with the tune, I'll come in here, and so this has, you know, we're looking at a scale here that goes with our map sensor, okay? I come in here and I will make it that it won't change it more than 30 or less than 30. And the reason is, and this is usually what I try to go for, it depends on the setup really more than anything else. The reason is, if you have it that this is set for 50 or more and you have a misfire, what actually will happen is it'll take this table and play it against what your fuel settings are. So if you did do a very good job tuning your VE table, and then all of a sudden you got a miss on whatever cylinder, and that's the side that your wideband's on, what's going to actually happen is it's going to start dropping fuel into it because it's going to see that it's going to think that it's lean. Believe it or not, when you have a misfire, even though you're not burning that fuel, you're also not burning that oxygen. So you see more oxygen on an oxygen sensor, and what happens is this guy will come in here and start putting more fuel in because it thinks that it's lean. So I can't tell you how many Holleys I've had come in with a misfire on a base map, and they are pegged on the closed loop learn. And this is something to look at when you're dyno tuning. If you're going in and like, let's say you come up into boost, or like you're running a nitrous car and it starts breaking up with the nitrous, and all of a sudden, you know, you start seeing it go and it's pegging your closed loop learn, then you know, oh shit, like I got a problem. You know, I got something going on. And that's usually when I'll come in then and I'll turn the closed loop off. And when I turn the closed loop off, then I'll know, okay, like I'm seeing it go lean here, and then I'll go in and I'll sprinkle in a little bit more fuel. And if it still goes lean, I don't see any change, then I know I got a misfire of some sort going on. It makes it a hell of a lot easier when you have EGTs. But we'll circle back to closed loop learn after we have everything set up. I don't really even need to. The main thing here is that the closed loop learn is going to give you what you need to be able to target your air fuel after you properly tune it. That's the biggest thing. It needs to be tuned properly first. You can't go in and just say, hey, closed loop, do the work for me, you know. And this is where, when I first originally start putting the car on a dyno, I will turn the closed loop off, and I will go in and do some load-based, you know, runs up through, and I'll be like, okay, like I usually know where something should sit on the VE. So like, let's say I go in and I want to target 12.0 and I tip in and it goes like 12.7, I'll go and I'll add some fuel into it. I'll add a little bit more fuel into it, and I'll add a little bit more fuel into it until we get where we need to be, that 12.0 target, without it doing any learning on its own. And then I'll turn the closed loop on as we get closer into maybe playing around with timing or something like that as we're doing the, we're building our tune on the dyno. And that way I can watch the closed loop and it should try to target, right where we want to be. So if we're seeing our, if I go and we do a pull, and let's say our target air fuel's 12.0, we've already tuned it at 12.0 with the closed loop off, and now we were at 20 degrees of timing, we put 22 in, and I see it go through the dyno pull, and it's like 2% plus or minus, I know we're right where we need to be, even so, it should still be there even if you turned it off. But, if you see something else going on where you put 2 degrees into it, or you pull 2 degrees out of it, or whatever, and then you start seeing your closed loop learn go, like 20% for whatever reason, well, then that's a time where you need to go and look at something. I keep saying closed loop learn, but what I mean is the closed loop itself. The learn is actually what it learns over time. So, like, the easiest way to explain it, and Holley tried to dumb this down, but the difference between closed loop and learn is the difference between short-term fuel trim and long-term fuel trim. So short-term fuel trim on a standard, on-the-road automobile that's the short-term fuel that's being trimmed plus or minus on a vehicle as it goes down the road. And then over time, it will learn what the short term is, and it will add it into long term. So what let's say you're going down the road on a standard car, and it's pulling 10% for a minute, and it does that for a while. Well, the long term will start pulling a percentage as well till the short term goes to 0. So if you were pulling 10% for a while, like you're cruising on the highway, it's pulling 10%, and then all of a sudden the long term will come in and start pulling that same percentage that you're seeing on your short term. Eventually your short term will end up being 0, and you'll have a long-term fuel trim of -10. And that, in the diagnostic world, when you're working on a standard vehicle, is usually when we go and we start looking at, well, why is it doing that? There's got to be a problem. Is there an intake leak, exhaust leak, something like that going on that's making it pull that fuel or add that fuel, either or. And the tuning aspect of stuff, especially if you're dealing with something high horsepower, it's not uncommon to have it target a little bit outside of it, and that's why we have the closed loop and the learn parameters to jump in there. On Lewis's car, his Nova, I don't even use the learn. I just keep the closed loop in there, and it's basically there as a safety more than anything else. So it's the difference between being an open loop and closed loop. So next one is variable valve timing. Or variable cam timing, I should say. If you have like a Gen 4 and you're running the VCT on it still, which I don't think anybody does, but you can play with that on here. I can't tell you that I've used it too often. Individual cylinders, this is if you have something weird going on and you want to kind of diagnose it, or you need to add fuel or remove fuel for certain cylinders for whatever reason. I've actually used this before to diagnose a bad injector. I had a car that when you would get up into boost, it would start breaking up. And what I ended up doing was I was adding fuel into that cylinder because it had a bad set of injectors in it. And I think it was like cylinder 8. I added like 20% of fuel into it, and then it stopped breaking up because it was actually lean in that cylinder. It's a quick, easy way to kind of figure it out, but it's not the best. I wish there was actually like a way to do cylinder balance in this, but there isn't. Inputs and outputs. This is just how you're going to set your stuff up as far as your inputs and outputs go. So like if you had the AC kick, you can have it be 12 volt or a ground. Obviously it's not going to be like a high amp 12 volt out, it's only a low amperage. Same thing with electric fans. So if you had the relays wired on your electric fans that they were grounded and you needed to have them have a positive kick, you could have it set up like that. Same with the AC shutdown. Alright, so now we're done with system parameters. The next one you want to deal with is the map sensor. So this comes out of the box set for the internal 1 bar. We're going to come down here and we're just going to, just for shits and giggles, we're going to make this the Holley 5 bar. Okay? And then it will ask you, do you want to go in and have it automatically scale everything? And you can say yes. Coolant temperature sensor, we're going to just keep the LSX one in there. The MAT, we're going to stay with the LSX one. We're going to do, it doesn't even matter really on this. This is just a reading more than anything else. But they have it predetermined as the Holley 100 PSI one. If you're running the stock LS one, you obviously want to select the stock LS one. And then fuel pressure, again, it depends on what sensor you're running. They only have 2 predetermined ones in here. The other thing you can do is set a custom one up. So I know if you use like a low dollar motorsports one, Brandon will give you a scale that's from 0.5 to 4.5, and if you click this and highlight the whole thing and then hit R, it'll straighten it out for you. And then let's say you had a 150 psi sensor, and then you come over here, and this is a weird thing, I'm curious if it's going to do it here. Oh no, it didn't do it this time. But again, if you highlight the whole thing and hit the letter R, you'll be able to scale it, okay? And actually we'll tell you here, fill row values is what the R is set for, okay? So that's how you set up a custom pressure sensor if you're running something different. That's the gist of the sensors. We'll go over the fuel table in here. All right, so this is the volumetric efficiency table for the Holley, okay? Now you can see it's set from 0 to 60 pounds of boost. Now maybe you bought a 5 bar sensor for whatever reason and you're like, I'm not gonna use all that, but I at least wanna know how to. Or you just have a 5 bar in there because you got it laying around. The one thing to keep in mind here is if you're running an NA setup, this is gonna be your 0, okay? Oops. So there's your 0. And now see how that automatically rescaled for us? So at this point, we know, okay, it's gonna idle. Well, what I would do here first is come up here and highlight this whole thing and then hit column. You're gonna hit C for column, and then you get a better scale. So let's say it's gonna idle here. You know, I can tell you already, if it's idling here and you're in this high of a VE, there's a problem going on here. So this is where you're gonna come in here, gonna bring this down. You know, usually VEs would be like 30, 40, somewhere around there. And what you can kind of do to smooth this table out is come up here, and now, like, let's say this area here is gonna be about 70. And just so you guys know, what I'm using here for a quick keys is control and then the right arrow, or the left arrow. That gives you, it's a percentage. If you click, actually no, that's in the manual. I forget. I think it's 10% is what it changes it when you hit it to the left. This is a big change when you hit it to the left arrow. If you hit the down arrow, it's a smaller change, as you can see. So like big change, small change. Okay. So we're gonna say that that's 62, 63 in this area, and then what you would do here is you would hit the letter C again and smooth that back out. And then the same here. Usually what I'll do here is I'll bring this area, let's just say this is where it was idling. In this area, you have a little ball bouncing around right here. You always wanna make your tables look nice. So we're gonna take this area here, bring it down here, and then we're gonna go just 2 clicks down, and then we'll bring this to, again, C, okay? 107 on the VE is a little, pretty much probably what it would be. What I'm gonna do here is just some quick edits, and I'm gonna bring this whole area down now to meet, like, this is how quickly and easily you can do this. So like, I'm just literally using the arrows and then the quick keys, okay? We have now built ourselves a table. Now if you want to take this from here, kind of smooth it out a little bit, you now hit the letter R for row, and has now smoothed that table out, made it look a little bit better. Now this is just a hypothetical table. You know, I'm just kind of arbitrarily putting stuff together. But the one thing you want to go over here and look at then is, do you have a nice kind of linear table? There's no big bumps in it. You know, you don't have a spot where it's like this and you see, like, look at how ridiculous that looks, okay? So at least you don't have that going on there. So we'll put that back to where it was. And again, this is more or less just kind of walking you guys through how to do some of this stuff quickly and easily. I'm basically using the control key and the up and down and left and right arrows, and then the quick keys, which you can get right here. So you got the fill row values, which is going to be your side to side, and your column values, which is going to be up and down. And then you can also do fill selected values, and then you can hit offset selection. So that's going to be O, and then you can offset it by a multiplication. So let's say you just wanted to add 5, okay, you would just hit OK, and it would add, oh, it multiplied it by 5. I don't really use the offset too often, to be honest with you, but what's this? So, oh, we want to add 5, so plus 5, and then we hit OK. So now we got it where we need to be, and then Control Z will take you back to where you were. But again, we're just kind of going through some stuff, and then at the same time, once you get this all kind of squared away here, and I want to be as upfront as possible here. This is just making a base table to get us running here. And this is not saying, oh, this is what you need for the dyno. This is just to get the car up and running. That's going to be a whole lot better than using a wizard. So now you have a nice smooth table that'll do your work for you. All right, now we're going back to this table again. And let's say, now we still have that 60-pound sensor in there. But let's say we only planned on running about 30 pounds of boost at the most. Okay, so now we're going to hit 30. And we're going to hit that same thing again. And then hit C. Well, now we're going to be idling. You know, we knew we were idling in this area before. Okay, this is good for if you had a car. Let's say you had a car that was NA and then you decided to turbo it. Okay. Now we're going to highlight here and bring that same area back in. Okay. So now what we can kind of do is actually bring our areas that we had back into what our original kind of spec was. Okay. And we can smooth everything out to get ourselves squared away here. And then from here as well, drag this area over, come up and do, there we go. So now we have the kind of everything under 3,000 RPMs smoothed out. Now I can tell you right now, this is probably not very close, especially at 30 pounds of boost. Now you're never going to be at 30 pounds of boost at idle, but usually what I'll usually try to go to start for is about 10 pounds of boost. I'll take it to about 100% VE. Okay, so there we got that. And then we'll just take this area, highlight it, and drop it down and do our column again. Okay, and then from there, we can kind of bring this over and get us squared away there. All right, so then our next step here, and again, I'm probably gonna have somebody give you some shit at some point, who the fuck knows, but we are just building a table just to get us up and running that you can start targeting what you need to get yourself onto the dyno. Okay, just getting us close here. Yeah, so that's pretty damn close to where we would want to be here. And then we'll just do row again, highlight the whole thing, and smooth it out. So there you have a pretty good basic setup that would get you pretty damn close to being up and going. Now, if you know you're gonna hit it, like a lot of times I'm setting a car up on like 6 pounds of boost to start. Okay, it really depends on the setup. But if I have somebody coming in at 6 pounds of boost, and that's where we're gonna start, and we're gonna work our way up, I might go in and make the 0 or 100%. If that's what if I knew that's where we were before. It really just depends. Okay, it's all dependent on your setup. If you know more about it, because maybe, like I said, you went from the NA to turbo or whatever side of things, you know, you're gonna know, oh, my VE at 100% was 100% before, and you can come in here and make your VE 100% in this area right here at 0 vacuum. But I'm gonna tell you right now, your VE is not gonna be 100% at 0 anymore because A, you probably were wrong with it being 100%, and you had to have some crazy NA setup for it to work that well. But B, it just doesn't really usually work that way. But also now that you put a turbo in there, it's not going to be as efficient as it was at 0 pounds of boost as it would be before. So I'm going to take a quick break here and we'll restart the video. All right, so there's our base fuel. Next part here is the learn table. Like I said earlier, I turn this off when I first get going here. And sometimes I don't even ever use it at all. But the learn table is based off of this table and how you set it up. I don't really love it. It's not like it's terrible, but it can get you in trouble, especially if you're a DIY beginner type deal. But what the learn table will do is it'll highlight this area. I don't even know if you can type stuff in here. Yeah, you can. Okay, so now I just put 10% in there, and let's say I put, so you know what you'll see here is I'm over here on the base fuel. This table is all normal looking. Okay, it's a very nice smooth table. And then you come over to learn table and you want to hit transfer learning to base. I don't even know why I'm explaining this, but I am anyways. So now what this will do is it'll ask you if you want to smooth it, and you say yes, and it'll transfer it over. Okay, so now you can see this area here has increased itself by 10%. Now we're going to take it out. Back where we were. I don't even know if that's... That looks close. We'll just smooth it here. See what this table looks like here. Alright, so the other thing that's nice here is you can come in here. I don't keep hitting buttons by accident here. You can come in here and like, okay, so here's your fuel table. If you right click this, it puts the actual map over here. So if you're like over here and you're like, I got a nasty hole in my fuel map, you can see it come up like a boner in there for you, and then you can go fix it. And again, Control Z will bring you back. Alright, so there's how a split screen works. I don't really use it too much, but it is handy for certain things. It just depends on what you're trying to do. So back to learn table. Don't use it. It's just going to get you confused. So if you've used a wizard, the wizard will set you up for a simple setup here. So you're going to have idle, cruise, wide open throttle. Okay. So you're going to type in these numbers and it's going to give you this. Okay. Here's the issue that I have with the wizard, and I hope most of you that are watching this are going to notice this. If you bring this 2D table to life and you look at it, I don't want it to be 14.7 at 15 pounds of boost with my target air fuel ratio. So what'll happen here is, even if you are doing everything the way I was saying about targeting on your own with open loop, basically turning the closed loop learn off, turning the learn table off, and you're coming in here and you're coming in here and you're doing all your work and making everything work the right way and blah blah blah, you know what you'll end up with. I didn't want to do that. What you'll end up with here is, now you go turn your closed loop on like I was telling you about, and it's going to be trying to pull the fuel out. So let's build a good table here. Okay, so we're just, again, talking a basic setup. So we're going to talk from here down on NA. Okay, so NA, we want to see it, I would say, at the most in this area, like 13.2 is pretty good. And your standard pump gas is going to be 14.1. Okay, and usually at idle, I want to see it try to hit, it's a basic Stoich. Okay. To kind of save for the emission side of things, I like to try and target, if the car likes it, it really kind of depends on stuff, but I like to target that 14.7 under cruise. If it'll take it, I'll go for it. And if it'll go 15.2, I will. It just really depends on what it wants to do. Now, this line right here, and that's about all you really need to know for NA. Oh, sorry, I completely forgot. We're at 13.2 here. I want to then come over here where it would be in wide open throttle, okay? And I would want to go, let's say just 12.5. And then we'll take this, take these two, and go column. And I don't really love that. We'll make this 12.7. It really, again, really depends on the setup. If it's something else that's you got something kind of crazy going on, whatever, obviously you're going to want to, maybe you'll have more resolution if you're running NA than this, so you'll have this whole table to work with. But we're just saying that this is your wide open throttle range, and we're going to target for 12.5. Again, I'm not teaching you how to tune, I'm just teaching you how I would set this up. I do have a tuning class, and I go through all this stuff in a whole lot more in depth. It's about, it's an 8-hour class, and it's pretty informative, and we do some pretty cool stuff, and I hand out paperwork and show people stuff that I've done, and all kinds of cool items here at the shop. But that's neither here nor there. So let's go over into, if we were going to be boosted, I would say a good place to start is to target for 11.7, and then hit this and hit column. I want to see where it puts us here. I don't hate this air fuel. Like if you're at 6 pounds at 12.0, like I don't hate that. I usually don't start trying to go like 11.8 until I'm about 10 pounds. So this doesn't suck, but it's just a generalized, like, that's a good, it's not a terrible looking target table, okay? But that's how to set the target table up. Go over into these guys quick. So I really only ever change these two tables, okay? These other ones, I just kind of leave them alone. But this one is, think about like the accelerator pump on a carburetor. If you tip in on the throttle, this one will tell the car how much more fuel to add as you punch that throttle, okay? So if you hit the throttle and you see the thing go lean for a second and then come in where it needs to go, come into this table and add some percentage to it, okay? Tip in again and see what it does. Usually what I end up with, because I'm just a little heavy-handed on this table, is I'll be something like 7 here, and it'll look, I don't want to say they all look like that, but it'll look like this, and you'll go in, you'll tip in, you'll see it go rich for a second, and then come lean, and then go to where your target is, basically. And I'm a whole lot happier with that than it going lean for a second, and then going to our target. The reason being is I would rather have a little bit of extra fuel there when you have that tip in, that kind of extra load on it, than I would rather have it be lean. This one's the same way. If it sees a map change, and this is the rate of change on the map sensor itself, that's how this table works. So if you have a way, like if you see that you're full throttle, but you have a really laggy turbo, and then as your turbo comes in, you see it go lean, you could have this table be work with that. The only reason why I really ever change this table is, again, if you have a really laggy turbo and you've already load-based tuned that area of the map at that level of boost. And when I say load-based tuned, I'm saying it's being held on the dyno and you're sitting there at, let's say, 4,000 RPMs, 10 pounds of boost, and you adjusted your VE table. All right, so yeah, you adjusted your VE table to where it needs to be at this pound of boost under a load-based range, okay? That doesn't mean that you should go and use this to compensate for a hole in your VE table, because you shouldn't. But the TPS rate of change is definitely a help if you have if you know that when you go to first tip in and you have your VE table set pretty well, that you need that little bit of splash of fuel extra to it. And I feel like Holley has this table a little leaner than it needs to be from the beginning. Temperature enrichment. This one's going to be for the coolant temperature sensor. Obviously, the car wants more fuel when it's cold. You know, let's say you tuned it when it was hot, everything's great, and then cold starts like shit. Use this table. Give it some more fuel. Or maybe it needs some more timing, I don't know. But the air-fuel ratio offset works in that same manner. This will use your closed loop target, and it will change it to what you want it to be. So this, if you have it set that it'll go into closed loop at 100 degrees, or maybe you have it go into 60 degrees, you can have it set your AFR richer at that moment based off of what you have going on. Same thing with air temperature. This one, watch out for. If you have a car that goes fat, or it goes hot because it's boosted, it will start pulling fuel up here. So that's where you might want to come in here and be like, okay, just leave my VE table alone and leave it like that. If it goes, let's say you have a car that goes 180. Or maybe you want to go the other way with it and you want to say, you know what, I would like to see this go a little bit richer, and you want to go 110, and then, I don't want to do it like that. Let's make all this 100. Then you can go like this and do. So you want to add a little bit more fuel as it gets hotter. You can do it either way. Anyway, it's not terrible. You know, it just depends on how you want to do it. Usually unless it's a different setup, I'll just leave that one alone. Startup enrichment. This is the same. This is kind of dependent on what I was saying earlier about the coolant temp enrichment. The coolant temp enrichment's more dependent on how the car is running when it's cold, but has been running for a little bit. The startup enrichment is based off of time. So you have the amount of fuel it needs when it cranks. This is what it needs when it first fires, okay? And then you have the after start hold off. This is how many seconds or milliseconds it will hold that fuel that was the cranking fuel after it starts up. And then you have the after start enrichment. So this is the amount of fuel it's adding with cooling temperature after first starting up. And then you have the decay, which is the amount of seconds it takes to decay that out. So if it takes the car a while to warm up, and let's say you're at 100 degrees, and now you lost that, and like at 100 degrees, this is putting 137% of fuel in there on top of what you were at. So 100% would be zero. Would be your zero. You're putting 37% more fuel in there at 100 degrees. When your after start decay hits that 13 seconds, that 37 degrees is going to fall out. Which that's kind of a little bit of a ridiculous after start enrichment. I never noticed that was so crazy in these base tables. Usually I'll make this table pretty linear. Not like terribly linear, but like it won't look exactly like that. I don't mess with them too much, but this would be more if you're having a problem with the way the car first starts up and then continues to idle until it gets up to warm up. Startup enrichment and acceleration enrichment are going to be the areas you want to look at. Last one is fuel control. I never turn this on. I'll be honest with you, I never turn it on. This is how you can make it have sweet fireballs by leaving it off. I'm not going to tell you how to make a crack a pop tune though, because that's stupid. All right, next one that we'll go to is we're going to talk about idle. idle speed, that's pretty self-explanatory. You know, some of this stuff, if you guys download HP tuners and you know if you're using an LS, you can go in here and you can be like, oh, I want to run the same as XYZ, and you can just put it right the hell in there and be done with it. So idle speed is going to be dependent on your cam and what you got going on. IAC settings, for the most part, I never really mess around with the idle spark. The idle spark is going to be how it manipulates the spark to hit your idle target. So this will be it adding and subtracting quickly or slowly on the timing, and this will be how quickly it goes up and down. And then this was going to be your settings for your IAC control. So like you have a bunch of stuff here for your advanced idle control that you can do, and then you have your IAC. You can set what your setup is. This is the standard LS setup that's right here. This number, I usually end up making it about 60 if it's a big cam car. And the decay time, this would be the one that if you rev it up and then it holds the throttle and then falls down slow, change this to like 2. And it usually will come down slower, okay? The idle start ramp. This is the RPM above the idle to start the ramp. This is how quickly it's gonna bring that down. So I think you can go to 1500 on this. Yeah. And then RPM above idle to re-enable idle control. You can make this, I usually make it like either 100 or I leave it at 50, one or the other. The hold position for startup, this is going to be more dependent in a couple different ways on how you have the park settings set. So the park is how it's going to be set with the coolant temperature when you first turn it on. I've had setups where I've had to have it at 100. I've had setups where this is just fine. It just kind of is dependent on how your startup is. And also, this is going to be where it parks, like I said, when you're starting up. So the hold time, I usually end up setting about 2 as well. And the decay, I usually make it 3. It just depends on the setup and how much air it needs and how you also have your TPS set. I do have a video. Oh no, I don't think I have a video. I should do that's one of the ones, I should write some of this shit down. I should do a video on doing how to set the TPS and IAC on one of these, and I think I'll do that probably down the road here. I do have a car out there that we're doing right now that we can use to do it. So that's the idle stuff. Pretty quick, pretty self-explanatory. Again, if you have any questions on this stuff, you guys are more than welcome to shoot me a message. Here we go again with this one. So this is again where the same thing will happen with the wizard. Okay, now we went in, we changed some stuff, we put it in the way that we wanted to, and what we saw here is, let's say I want our idle to be 12, which is not going to be dependent. So on a LS, I usually like to have the idle at like 20, 22, 18 if I want to have it sound a little crazy. It just depends. Cruise, let's say it's a big cam car, we're going to go 42. And then wide open throttle, I want it at 22. Okay. Now that's the simple table. Now remember, we're running 30 pounds of boost potentially on this setup. Or if you're NA, you're probably good the way I just did it. I still don't really like the way it is, but when it's NA. But also keep in mind here, if you're using this whole, if you haven't rescaled this and using this whole scale here, because you're running that big map sensor and you plan on doing NA over to turbo later, now when you're wide open throttle on that NA setup, you're running 42 degrees of timing. So let's go back over. Let's turn on our 2D table here, and we're gonna come over here, and we're gonna fix this. So we'll make this whole thing here 22. We'll take this area here. We'll do column, and then we're gonna also take this area here. For whatever reason, it gets up into this area. We'll make this like, well, I should just, let me do this real quick. So I'm gonna make this our 30 so it matches our fuel table, and then we'll make this like that and do column so they're matching. Okay, so usually I like to pull, like I don't want to have timing here. It just for the look of it, really more than anything else, because it's gonna look weird in the table. So let's say top of our table we want to have it 10 degrees. Okay, and then we'll take this area here and bring it and do our column again. Again, let's say we're talking turbo LS, 10 degrees of time, or 10 pounds of boost. I'm usually going to run, believe it or not, that actually came out pretty damn quick, pretty damn good doing it that way. I would usually run about 17. And so what we can do here is just come in here and do this and go column. And then we can come back up here and go column. And let's look at some things here. So 15 pounds of boost, 15 degrees of timing. Yeah, I can live with all this. So on pump gas setup, this is pretty damn close to where I'd want to be. And this is conservative. Again, you're building a base map. You're not building a, go burn the thing down on a street map. Let's go a quick smooth. And again, look at your timing table. I hate that you have to do this. But yeah, so that's, you got a nice smooth map. I've seen it before where you're going to have a timing table where, it's not going to want a lot of timing at like 4,500, but you might want to come over here then and like maybe like $5,000, you're like, oh, I need to add a degree. So you're like, give me a degree. Well, give me a decimal here. So now I got 1 degree there. Maybe it wants another one here. It doesn't usually happen too much this way, but every now and then it'll make a little bit more power up top if you give it some timing. So then you can highlight this area, smooth it. So now, a little aggressive on the timing here, but now we got a little bit different looking of a timing graph. I gotta rotate it again. Now you can see from here, as we come over, it kind of rises in this area. Gives us a little bit more timing to chase our stuff. The one way to kind of look at that sometimes is to go back and look at your VE. If you notice, like in the 5,000, 4,700 area, that's your highest area of VE, and then you have less VE. Let's say it falls off 5% as you go up through. That's where you might be able to benefit from like a degree or so once you get on the dyno. But I usually don't really like do that too much. I used to back in the day, believe it or not. Like it's one of those things. I say this in my class. I say it, and I'm sure I said it in my videos. If you're not learning every day you're tuning, then you're not doing it right. I learn something new almost every time I get something on the dyno, whether it's a 400 horsepower car or a 2,000 horsepower car, and I do both. So I usually learn something new. It just depends on what the hell's going on and how that's all transpiring and yada yada yada. So there's that. Anything else with Spark here? Cranking parameters, unless you're having a weird thing where you need less or more timing when it goes to fire up. Like if you hear ping on fire up, like pull some timing out of there. This is going to be rev limiters. In the HPs and Dominators, this is underneath the system ICF. But the rev limiters here, you can set that however you want to. I usually do Spark high only. I usually leave it at that. I usually do Spark high only, or if you want to do Spark only, you can set a low RPM. I do not ever cut the fuel. That's just a good way to burn a motor down. Launch retard, this is if you want to have a launch retard on an active input, or at a release of an input. So like, if you had a trans brake or a clutch switch or something like that, this is how you would enable that and wire it in. Don't use this one. Timing versus coolant temperature. You might see that you want more timing when something's cold. When it's cold, this is where you would add that in. You also need to set your coolant temperature range down here, which is weird. Like you would think after you set the coolant temperature up, it would be there, but it's not. Coolant temperature versus air temp, timing versus air temp. That's where this comes in and involved as well. If you're, sorry about that. The camera battery went bad. Anyways, so this would be where you would set up your timing pool if you had something going on with the with air temperature, where you needed to pull timing for air temperature. Inputs, this is going to be your inputs for your rev limiter 1 and your launch retard if you're using them. Rev limiter 1 is this one over here, by the way. I forgot to even explain this. This is going to be your 2-step, okay? So like trans brake, clutch switch, whatever. This is where that's going to come into play. So let's say you wanted to have it at 3,500. Boom, there it is. All right, that's Spark. Next one is going to be your transmission. So we put in for a 4L80. We're only going to rev it to 7. We only want to go 200 RPMs. We have stock gear ratios. You can also do an auto manual shift mode. I'll enable that and show you guys about that later. The one big thing is right here. Make sure these are correct. So let's say you're running a 30-inch tire. It'll now change your settings to go along with that. Okay. You also need to know what the speedometer stuff is if you have a speedometer you're hooking up or whatever. But let's go back to the real size at 28, and we'll go from there. You can set up your scales based off of TPS, which is where I would tell you to do them. I don't suggest to do anything else. I'm really not going to get too crazy into doing transmission tuning stuff because for the most part, Holley has done a pretty damn good job with this. I've never had any complaints. But the one thing I will tell you is how to lock it out so that if you're on the dyno, you don't have a problem. Okay. So when you're on the dyno, you don't want to. You want to tune in third. Okay. So you would want to come in here and you would want to make it that it could shift from 3 to 4 at 200 RPMs. Okay. So it'll unless you have a crazy rear end setup, it's never going to shift into fourth gear. And the same thing with the third to second, you would want to make sure it didn't do the 3-2 shift unless it was at 0 RPMs. Okay, just don't forget to change these back. Same with a wide open throttle shift. You want to make sure it doesn't do the 3-4 unless you're at 8,000 RPM. You can make it whatever you want to, but you want to make sure it's above your rev limiter, and that will lock it out for you on the dyno, so it won't go above the that third gear basically. Don't mess with these unless you have a reason to. Okay, this is the line pressure for the transmission. Unless your transmission builder was like, hey, you can run a little bit more line pressure or yada, yada, yada. And this would be stuff that like most people are using Jake's transmissions with the 480s. Or there's a couple other ones we've used as well, but Jake's is a pretty well-known name. So if you talk to Jake and he was like, oh, like you can add 10% in your load versus line pressure, then go ahead and do that. But I don't ever mess with these. Don't ever need to. One of the cars we did here was Justin Conrad's. He had a blower 4th gen F body, and that had a 480 in it. And that car, worked. The trans worked great on it. We didn't have an issue with the way that it shifted or anything like that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. And then you can change the line pressure with temperature as well. Again, this would be something if the trans builder tells you to do it, change it. If you're on a stock trans, don't touch it. I haven't seen any benefit in that. Torque converter parameters, again, this all depends on your converter, what you have going on, whatever. If you don't understand how the torque converter parameters work, don't even fuck with it. Again, their stock stuff is okay. I actually, a lot of times, I think if you look at a factory table, I think the third gear is when TCC can start enabling at a certain RPM. Okay, and then it's also dependent on TPS. So if you're under 50% TPS, the torque converter will engage if you're in third or fourth gear. And then you can set the lock and unlock pattern. I did have a car in here not too long ago that it would flare as you were driving, and what it was these two numbers were too low. I had to bring them up, get them a little bit, so it wasn't sitting on the torque converter right in that mid-range between these. So I actually spread them apart, and it was a lot better. And this is how the cycle comes in and how fast. So if you change these, you can make it that it won't hit it, like you won't even feel the converter clutch come in. So it just depends on that. Again, there's so many different things with your setup. I wish I had something here to use that was specific to kind of show how it will work, but it's really hard, and it's one of those things where you won't feel it doing it, and it won't be something you can tune unless you can feel it doing it. I did have a guy I worked with remotely that was having an issue, and I was able to watch what was going on. He was cruising and look at the data log and say, oh yeah, that's what I need to do. Again, it's all worthless without the data log. So like if you don't have a data log to go along with what your concern is, like you'll never be able to tell what the hell's going on. You can go drive the thing around all you want to. Auto trans manual mode, this is going to be set with if you have an auto like if you're going from auto to manual for the up and down deal. Sorry for stuttering there. If you're using an auto to manual mode, this is going to be how you're going to select that input type, the same way we did with the fans and all that stuff earlier. I'll show you this real quick. So if you have the auto trans manual mode, you just drag it down here and put the stuff where you need it to be because you already set this stuff up. So now it's defined and it says where it's at. I thought there was an auto stick thing in here. Oh, the paddle shift enable. There we go. So the paddle shift enable is going to be something that now you have an input output for there. Only problem is you don't have anywhere for it to go. So let's say this car doesn't have AC. Now you can have an upshift and a downshift if you want to. And how about that? All right, that's the transmission side of stuff, and this is the one I really wanted to get into the most because I've seen this happen a lot. So if you go to pedal versus throttle, oh, they fixed it. So one thing you should look at with your setup, if you're using drive-by-wire and it's sitting there idling, look at what your TPS percentage is. Okay, it should also tell you like a IAC percentage. So IAC percentage, I usually want to see between like 10 to 30%. So if this is at 5 and you're seeing it that the IAC is like 80%, bring this to 8, okay? And then the other thing you can do is like now, if you want to bring that throttle in a little bit faster, you can like highlight this area and like do something like that. And then, so like that it'll make it snappier, believe it or not. We have a beautiful C10 out in the shop right now. It was a SEMA show car. It has an LS3 with a Magnuson supercharger on it, and it's stick shift. And I had a similar problem with that, where you'd get out of the throttle and you would feel it dip and like almost stall, and then it would catch. And I had to bring the throttle position percentage. I had to bring that up to tell the blade, hey, this is where I want to idle at. I had a similar problem with the Caprice we did with Hot Rod Garage as well. And that thing, I wanted to be like 13% or something like that to actually get it to work. And again, inputs and outputs, don't even mess with this shit. It's already predetermined if you're using the harness. So, last but not least, the thing I'm going to show you is the boost control and how to put it in there. Because we were talking about it boosted, we were talking about NA, we're doing a little bit of everything here. And to do that, you're going to hit Toolbox, add individual configuration, and then you come down here to boost. Default boost. How about that? So now you're going to select what you have, okay? You can only do a dual port setup on the Holley, okay? Keep in mind, if you do that, now you got to tell it where the outputs go, okay? And if you're using electric fans, that's a whole nother thing as well. So, this is basically based off of dome pressure is what we're talking about here. You could also do it that it's based off of, what am I trying to say? Wastegate side. There's different settings in the HPs and the Dominator. Sorry, I had a little bit of a brain fart there. So solenoid configuration is going to be, what do you have? So let's say you have a dual Holley, and you can, unfortunately on Terminators, only do dome pressure. One of the things you can do though is you can burn an input. And basically, so you're gonna have your dome pressure reading here. Now, if you come back over to here, so you have these two now that have come into your thing. So let's say you're not using, you just have both fans tied in the same kick. So you can come in here and put your boost. You have your positive, and don't confuse this with being a positive like putting power to it. It's positive like that's the additional boost. So you're adding boost with that side of the solenoid, subtracting boost with the other side of it. So now you have your boost solenoids configured, and it tells you it's J1 B11 and J1 B3. If you go back over here to your boost setup, you have dome pressure only. One thing you can do is you can take your map sensor signal wire and put it into an input and tell the Holley, hey, my dome pressure is based off, it won't know this, but it's reading the map pressure signal. And what you have to do when you come over here to dome control setup, it wants to have an input. Well, there's no input here now. So to do that, you come over here and you put in add individual configuration and give me an IO. So we're going to do default IO, come over here, and we're going to put set a signal in here for dome. Okay, so now we're going to hit enable, and it's going to be a 5 volt, and you're going to hit configure. Now we're running an LSX sensor. Okay, I'm not even going to go, actually, I can just do, nope, there isn't one in here. Or no, I said I had a 5 bar. So you can do the 5 bar right here. So you could put Holley 5 bar, and you're sharing that signal, okay, off the map sensor. And what you're doing is, like I said, you're going to split that signal wire that comes out of the Holley sensor or your map sensor. You're going to split it and go over and tee it into the dome. So now when you go over here, we're going to be out of inputs. But if we get rid of the manual bullshit upshift stuff, you can put your dome sensor in here. Now your dome sensor is configured, and you're all good to go. Okay. And then when you come back over here to boost, you go dome setup, you just can hit dome. And again, you're not having to run a separate signal or a separate sensor for it. You're just running off the map sensor. This is on the Terminator. It's the way I've done it a couple times. It works really well. You can run a dome sensor and run a separate thing. The part that sucks is you can't tell it. So the control method I have right now is dome pressure. On an HP or a Dominator, you can have this set for map pressure. So if you say I want to run 10 pounds of boost, it'll run 10 pounds of boost. With dome pressure, you're just reading what's on top of the dome of the wastegate. So 10 pounds of boost might only be 8, or 10 pounds of dome might only be 8 pounds of boost. I'm sure I know tons of people have gone into this. I don't want to get too strung up on it. But what I'm telling you is if you want to simplify this situation, split that wire, make it dome control, and do boost versus time. Okay? And now you can put in here 10 pounds. Okay, you can do boost versus gear too if you're going to do it that way. Whatever you want to do here. I usually use boost versus time on most of the drag stuff we're doing. So there's boost versus time. So now it's going to target 10 pounds of boost at the map sensor because you're using the map sensor as your dome control. Okay, the PI and D. I'll explain this real quickly. Yeah, and so on a simplified setup where you're just running, map versus spring pressure is going to be, your source is going to be compressor side. Now, if you are running a dome sensor, running CO2 control, you're going to be fixed. And when you do fixed, you're going to have to put what your pressure value is. I usually have 100, unless it's something like big horsepower. Then we're going to run a little bit more. PI and D. So your P is going to be how quickly it hits that target, and a lot of times if you see it overshoot, you want to bring this number down. If it undershoots, so like if you're like, oh, I want to see 10, but like you see it come up, but it comes up slow, turn this number up a little bit. I is going to be if you hit your target and you see it like this, it's like an ocean, bring this number down, and kind of like fine tune it. D, don't really worry about it unless you have some weird stuff going on with it, like really fluttering. I don't really mess with D unless I really need to. We already looked at the inputs and outputs here as far as the boost control inputs, and that's really about it here at this point. Like, I didn't go into everything here with the boost ICF. So trans brake launch, this is going to be where you would put in what you want it to, if you're running a trans brake, what you would want it to launch at. So let's say 10 PSI. If you have a scramble, this is how that would go. Let's say you wanted the scramble to be 10, you put it there. The problem is with this setup, we do have enough room for a scramble with it getting rid of the manual shift. So trans brake launch is going to go under rev limiter 1, okay? Because when you're on whatever your input is for rev limiter 1, let's say it's your trans brake, you're also going to want to have the launch configured with that as well, okay? So now you have those two set. Boost pressures, this is going to be, you can set it that like, okay, I have a hard cut at 30 pounds of boost. Okay, that's the most I want to run. If I run, let's say I only want to run 20 pounds though, but if I'm above 22 for more than 2 seconds, we're going to revert to wastegate. So boost pressure above 30 pounds, it'll cut the ignition completely, and it won't, until you reset on throttle, it won't come back in. Boost pressure above 22 pounds for more than 2 seconds, it will revert to the wastegate. Okay, so it'll just dump the wastegate. Okay. And then because you're not really using dome control, you don't really even need to worry about it. If you are using dome control, this would be if it overshoots on dome for a certain amount of time, you can come in and tell it to revert to wastegate or cut the ignition. That would be something as simple as like maybe the solenoid stuck. The switch trigger, this is to trigger a safety. I've done this before with AFR. So like if you set up a separate IO, and it's kind of complicated. I'm not even going to get too into it because it's really not worth it at the moment. This is maybe something I can do later. More of an advanced base setup. And then again, make sure that if you come over here and you're using the stuff you have set up, make sure you have it configured correctly with where it's at. Again, this is about how we want to be and how we want to go. I think that's really about it at this point. The only other thing that I could really kind of get into here would be, this is your gauge panel for when you start up, so you can go through here and you can make sure all your stuff looks right. If you want to change anything, lay stuff out differently, whatever, you can come in here and, like, let's say, you know, you wanted to change the way that the boost is here. You know, you just want to start over. You just hit X. It'll clean it all up. You can change these to say, you know, you have it say huge nuts if you wanted to. But, you know, just change. You can change them to what works for you. Like, I know on the Dominator setup, I have it set for, like, I have one that's drag race. So it's about, like, that one has just like our RPM and boost curve versus suspension. So, you know, and we're watching, we have suspension travel sensors and stuff in there. So that's kind of where we're using that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's kind of a basic rundown of how to get you going. Again, if you have any questions about any of this stuff, feel free to comment on the video. I try to be as active as possible as I can with these. I also, you guys can reach out to me via email as well. And then, like I said, if there's any questions, let me know. But that's a pretty good wrap of what we got going on here. In this scenario, this is how I would have built that entire thing before I ever started. I think we've been sitting here for about 50 minutes now for me to explain all that. So this is how you would start, you know, and then once you have this generalized part together, you should be able to go out. You hit see where it says offline right now. If you hit this if you plug your Holley in with this Holley cable here, if you plug your Holley in and then you hit, it should come up and say USB link. You would hit USB link and you have a window come up and it'll say send to ECU, and that's what you want to do. The other thing you can do, which I don't ever do, is if you do have the screen, you could save it on one of these guys, an SD card. You know, plug it into your computer, save it on an SD card. I can't even find my slot here. Plug it in, save it on, so you're going to save your file. So save global file as, and we're just going to do, you know, we'll go back over here to global files and we'll put in one new, so aced tune class, or, if I could type. So we'll just do, and then you can leave it like that because that's what it basically is, and then just put ace or whatever you want. Obviously don't put ace, but put whatever you want. But I usually just put a designation there. If I go in and make a change then later, so you don't lose your original base file, you know, I could have put ace base. Ace of base, how about that? Usually what I'll do as I'm making changes, I'll be like, oh, there's my, you know, version 1, 2, 3, as you go. That way you have them saved and they're always there for you. But yeah, again, if you guys have any questions, let me know. Hell, if I can figure out how to do it, I'm sure there's a way for me to do it. I'll put this file up on my page. But yeah, that's how you do it. If you have any questions, let me know. And I appreciate everybody who follows me and comes to my classes and comes and gets work done here at the shop. Check out some of our other stuff like the race show and also Horsepower Brothers. The race show is Luis Martinez and I with his racing program, and then the Horsepower Brothers is Mike Serrano. He has the black 4th gen Camaro that's big block twin turbo and a Haltech. So if you guys have any other videos you'd like to go watch or stuff like that, kind of see some of the stuff we do here at the shop, those would be the guys to go check out and you know, support them as well. So thank you guys. See you in the next video. I'm going to try and do one of these once a week. We'll see how it goes. I might be tired of it by the end of this, so we'll see. All right, thank you.